Welcome back to the 𝗀𝗚 Podcast. Tzvi broker with Rav Gerzi, and today we're going to be speaking about a topic which is so relevant for the times that we live in, the topic of multitasking. And I mean, not like they had podcasts 100 years ago, but even if they did, I don't think they would have been speaking about this topic, because when it comes to living our lives, and really we spoke about this, Rav Gerzi, in our course that we developed on work-life balance, where we spoke about the real challenges that we face, that people are so busy. I know Rav Gerzi always says, people you speak to, they're feeling overwhelmed, there's so many to-do lists, so many things that we do, but it's not just about the things, it's really more about the roles. If you look underneath all of these different to-do lists, there's the role of being a ben Torah or being a bas Torah. There's the role of being, if a person's married, a spouse, the role of being a father, being a mother, and there's the role of being someone within the community, right? There's the role of being a friend. And there's so many roles. We didn't even speak about parnasa, right? There's the role of being an employee or a manager or a business owner. There's so many different roles that we play. And what we spoke about in that course at length is that how are we able to be most productive? And what we're finding many articles being written about this, is this belief system that productivity equals multitasking. Meaning the more that we have the ability to multitask, right? Why do one things when you can do two, or you can do six, or you can do 12, right? Then the more productive you're able to be. And we even find, I know in my role of helping people with jobs and being involved with placements, when you look at job descriptions, you find often, what they're looking for is multitasking, which for me, as somebody that doesn't really love multitasking, for me that's just that job is going to ask you to do like a billion things. So that's always something which I'm not so excited about personally, but then you have people that love multitasking, but whether you like it or you don't like it, it seems like it's here to stay. But I'll share, I was very excited when I was preparing for this podcast, Rav Gerzi. I went to see what the research is saying. And as somebody who isn't such a lover of multitasking, the studies seem to be showing, right, if you look, that through multitasking, even though there are people that say you'll be more productive with it, right? Studies are showing that it impacts our short-term memory, right? It leads to increased anxiety. It can inhibit creative thinking. It can stop a person from getting into a state of flow. It causes more mistakes. So the question really is, and this is something which is being spoken about, is maybe we've been pushing, especially with technology today, do more, do many things at once, but is this really something which causes us to be productive, or is this something which actually hinders our ability to be productive? So what we want to speak about today, and obviously always it's a big topic, but just to be able to scratch the surface, what does the Torah have to say about this? Because that's what we're interested in. We understand that the Torah is the blueprint of creation. Where does the Torah weigh in on this topic of multitasking, where on one hand, we say we love it, meaning we're super into productivity. And we always hear the stories of the tzaddikim, the 𝗀𝗚𝗪, whenever they were walking, wherever they were doing something, especially when it comes to Torah, we think we should be doing one thing with our hands, multitasking another thing with our minds. So we can always be trying to learn Torah, always being able to try to achieve more. But on the flip side, we know we have this value of kavana, right? And kavana might seem to be like, wait, let's actually try to focus on one thing we're doing and not be distracted by all these other things. So what can we do with this puzzle, a seemingly contradiction? What does the Torah have to say about it?
Wow. Okay. Maybe we can go a slightly different route. You asked what Torah has to say. So I think as B'nai Torah, both of us hopefully are B'nai Torah, B'nai Aliyah, we've been learning for a long time. I'd like to go maybe a slightly different route and not necessarily quote a makar, quote a Torah idea. I'd like to take a step bigger and then maybe move into this, the myth of multitasking.
The myth,
which
okay.
Hopefully we'll go into a little
set
bit.
Set the stage for the drama.
I hope so. We'll see. We'll see where it goes. So first of all, I think this is a really important conversation, like really, really important conversation. One reason being is because I think a lot of the people that we sit with, and whether if it's to do with work or just being mechazek, coaching, whatever it's called, what we do, being mechazek somebody. So I know if you would ask 𝗀𝗚xe Gerzi what he's passionate about, it's upgrading people's lives. I believe deeply all of us have an immense potential to fulfill. There's so much light that each and every one of us can bring into this world. And that's what gets me happy. Mamash, I'm like addicted to it. If I could see somebody and they're like thriving and they're engaged and there's productivity, amazing. I get very excited about it. That's number one. So with that as a passion, with the chinuch that I've received from parents, grandparents, rabbonim, I study a lot about productivity, as you know. There's something else which I think is really important just to speak about, and maybe we should actually do a full conversation on this. And that is, so we're going to go off a little bit to come back on. So keep me focused, Rav Tzvi, keep me focused.
Multitask
yes.
Within the multitasking podcast. Okay.
So I want to start off by sharing the following, that as a child, people would ask, what do you want to be when you grow up? What do you want to be when you grow up?
They asked you.
I think they ask people, usually ask
people
kids.
In general,
Yeah.
okay.
What do you want to be when you grow up? I want to be like, my son would say, a fire truck. He wants to be a fire truck. You know, I want to be an astronaut, a doctor. When we're a kid, everything is open. And there's a cuteness to the reality of giving a 3-year-old giving answers to an adult. It's like, oh, cute, amazing. But then as we grow up, so to speak, as we mature, then that question becomes a lot more serious. Like, what am I going to be doing? And it becomes a source of, to a certain respect, of anxiety. How many young people do we know that we can ask that question and it's a source of anxiety? They don't know what they want to be doing. Now, what does culture tell us? Culture tells us, education system tells us that there is that one thing that we should be doing. Either, like sitting and learning or working, always learning. There always needs to be learning, but, working as in a doctor or this, psychiatrist, psychologist, bricklayer, plumber, whatever it may be. But there's that one thing that you need to do. There's one, what are you going to be when you're older? And it's interesting because I grew up in a home where I only realized this a number of years ago. It didn't come from me. Because when you would ask me that question, I'm sure it could have been a source of anxiety. Why? Because I love to do a lot of different things. And to say to 𝗀𝗧 Gerzi, no, you have to pick one thing, this would have made me very sad, would have made me very unhappy.
Yeah, I find that when working with people and when it comes to guiding them towards career choice, there's certain personalities that it's just like I see based off of the graphs. It's like high in so many different areas, and they really often those are the people who have the hardest time just saying I'm going to do this because they feel there's so many different things they can do. So
society has said to us there's one thing. I grew up in a home though which was very interesting. My father, he was the manager of an airline business. He's a shliach tzibur, really good shliach tzibur. 40-something years of leading tefillah. Beautiful singing, music. He's as well a therapist, massage therapy, does massage physical therapy. He as well sits with people and guides people. So he does a few different things, not one thing, a few different things. My grandfather, my father's father as well, it was very interesting. He retired when he was about 41 years old. He made enough money and Baruch Hashem lived the rest of his life very comfortably. He was an architect. He was an orthopedic cobbler, he was a sculptor, and he was an artist. And then I come into the world, and I'm like a little bit lost. Why? Because I love music. I love martial arts, health, and the study of the mind. I like coaching. And then there's a whole slew of Torah that I love. And really, I learned to realize I want to know everything all at the same time now. I mamish want to be like Hashem. I want to be like the tzaddikim. I want to be like Rabbi Nachman and the Baal Shem Tov and like the 𝗀𝗀 to know everything all at the same time now, so to speak. And it was an amazing thing because I was given the reshus to explore. No one ever told me I couldn't do this, that, and that. I started off, again, my father and my grandfather lived like that. They live like that. They do a number of things. So I did plumbing and carpentry. I studied bricklaying, and I've done music, and I do physical therapy. There's a slew of things that I do. So I look at this generation, and I call it, multi-potential, multi or polypotential. Multi and poly is Latin, I think, if I remember correctly. Latin, it's the same word. Latin and Greek, it's the same word. Multi-potentialists. Multi-potentialists. What does that mean? We live in a generation today where so many people can be doing more than one thing at the same time as a career. And we see this to be pretty normal today. In Israel, for example, we see people have more than one job, and they can have more than one job in different genres of career, which is okay. It seems to be normal today. So from that perspective, going into the subject of what we label the multitasking, which I don't like this term, the myth of multitasking, the nakuda is we live in a generation where we have the opportunity, we have the ability to do so many things that we love to do. Now, that's like on a macro level. I hope the pattern can come out clearly. You'll help me link it up.
Right,
because we're going to go now.
Sharing right now is meaning there's the aspect like multitasking of, checking my email.
Correct.
And being on the phone.
Correct.
And, handling this at the same time. You're saying that energy of the multitasking is something which is even manifesting in the world and on a macro level.
On a macro level. And it's okay.
Right.
And it's okay.
Okay.
Like that's we'll speak about tips at the end, and it's okay. So I think now let's talk about maybe this issue that we're dealing with. So again, the parallel. On one hand, we see in the world that you can't just do one thing today. On one hand, in the bigger picture, there's the opportunity to do a number of different things. I mean, we see in regards to career, people not knowing what they want to do as a career. It's an epidemic because so many people, we know the statistics, we've looked at the science repeatedly, and it's not getting any better, it's getting worse. You've got these young adults that are going to college, university, they have no idea what they want to learn, so they pick what? Usually it's like business or psychology, something like that, and you ask them, do you want to go into business? No. Do you want to study psychology? No. So why are you doing a degree in psychology or business? Because I didn't know what else I want to do.
Right.
And it's becoming an epidemic. So what I would suggest is it's not that people don't necessarily know what to do. What I found, and maybe, in the career coaching, maybe you've seen the same thing, but in my life as career coaching, I found that people want to do 2 or 3 or 4 different things. And if it's done in the right way, it's okay. It's okay. Let's zoom in now, because I think there is a parallel to this. So people call this multitasking. And I've got some notes here that I jotted down beforehand. And let's see where we go here. So multitasking, I don't believe is a correct term. I don't believe multitasking is real. We can't do more than one thing at a time. 𝗀𝗽cie, simply.
Now you're speaking about an actual task.
Yes.
Okay.
And I wrote here, we think doing one or more things at a time is productive and called multitasking. As you mentioned, what we do find and what the science finds is that when a person is doing more than one thing at the same time, so to speak, which again, 𝗀𝗀 Gerzi saying is not true, it takes more time, there's more mistakes, there's far more stress. And for me, I don't like that. I don't like making mistakes if I can help it. I don't like things to take more time, and I don't like stress. I like to be ragua, I like to be focused, and I'd like to get something done as quickly as I can because I want to get back to my learning or whatever I was planning to do. So the nakuda is we want to be productive, and there's an algorithm. We want in life to be productive, we want to be focused, we want to feel good, and we want to experience freedom. Like that, they're the things that we want. We want to be sameach, joyful. So what I do, I actually, and I'm sure I've picked this up somewhere, instead of saying multitasking, there's 2 things that I think that we do, and we have to be cautious in how we do it. Number 1, there's this idea of background tasking. So what's multitasking? Doing 2 or more things at a time. So again, it's a myth. I believe it's a myth. You do have something called background tasking. So that would be, for example, going on a run, exercising and listening to a shir, listening to a podcast. It could be you are, sitting and watching a documentary, or you have a sefer and you're going on your bike. Yeah, something like that you've got a background and then you're doing something which doesn't take so much brain capacity, so much brain energy, so much focus. So there's, again, background tasking. This makes sense to you?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds that within background tasking, there isn't that, you're not going to run into those issues that are coming up with what's called multitasking, because you're not using similar, meaning if a person's riding a bike, or a person's walking, a person's running, he has a certain system within his body that's running, and then there's something else working in a different part of his body, which enables the person to be able to do two things.
Yes,
right?
Comfortably, and you can do it comfortably, and you feel good, and you got it to a certain respect. Then the other nakuda is, instead of multitasking, what actually we do in our brain, it's using a tremendous amount of energy. So I call it switch tasking. We switch from one thing to another thing. That's what I believe people labels multitasking. But what that does to us, that actually hurts us, because it takes a lot of energy to move from one thing to another thing. A lot of energy. And tachlis, at the end of the day, what we find is that when we are switch tasking, we are less engaged. It takes us a certain amount of time. Just imagine for a moment, you are starting something and it's really exciting, and then you feel, I've got this to do and I've got that to do. So then you are about to get into it, and then bang, you move to something else. And again, bang, you move to something. You never get into anything. And you become lethargic. It becomes very, very difficult. Again, stress, mistakes. Why? Because our brain is hardwired to be focused on one thing at a time. Our brain is hardwired, our neurology, our physiology, the chemicals being released, the dopamine release. When we do one thing, beginning, middle, and end, and complete it, that's how we're meant to be functioning. So when we speak about switch tasking, I don't know if you want to go into it now. First, I just want to make sure that we understand. Multitasking, I throw out the window. I'm not into it, the myth of multitasking. There's background, foreground tasking, where I can do one thing that doesn't take much focus while I'm doing something else. I could drive and listen to something. I can drive and have a conversation. I can go for a walk, exercise and listen. I could be cooking and doing something else, having a phone call on a certain respect. So that's good. That could work.
Right.
But then you've got this switch tasking, which then we want to open up to really what is a healthier approach. What is a healthier approach? But switch tasking is where people have a few things that they need to do, and they end up expending far more energy, making mistakes, feeling overwhelmed. And then things are popping up in the head. Oh, you didn't do this, and then you run over here. You didn't do that, you run over there.
Right.
Switch tasking.
So I think what I'm hearing, and to try to be able to align it with what the studies are showing, is that the studies showing of the negative impacts of multitasking is really the negative impacts of switch tasking. And when Rebbe's saying it's a myth is because the definition that's given classically of multitasking is the ability to be able to do two things at the same time, which Rebbe's saying that can never happen. But really what's taking place, what's underneath multitasking, is the process of switch tasking, which we understand that from a neurological perspective and the way that the brain works, that's something which is going to drain energy.
Yes.
Because we were designed not to function in that way. Correct. And therefore, if we're looking to be able to be more productive, in the environments that we're living in, and where there are certain expectations where people are not just going to be doing one thing without doing anything else, what we want to look towards doing is what's called background.
There's background, foreground, where we can do.
With that, we can do things at the same time.
We can do a couple of things
at the same time. We want to aim towards that.
Yes.
Or there's something else.
Yes.
Okay.
Do you want me to go into that now?
Yeah, but before you go into it, I'll just throw a question, and maybe you'll tell me if this is going to come out along the lines of what you're going to say. Is that could it be that there are certain people that for them, the way that their brains function, the switch tasking just works better than other people?
It's a very good question. What I would assume is that they are maybe doing something else rather than a typical doing 3-4 things at once. It could be, and it's a skill that we could learn. This is the major issue. I think the major issue is that when we are trying to do multiple things at once without being conscious, without planning, it erodes a muscle of discipline. It erodes a muscle of focus. And what we want to do is try to reclaim that focus, that discipline, to reclaim that intention, that purpose. And we can. So it could be people who are doing multiple things. I do multiple things throughout the day, within my learning, within my exercise routine. I'm constantly switching things up and out. Now, to an onlooker, that may look a bit chaotic. But if you ask 𝗀𝗧 Gerzi, it's not chaotic at all. Beginning of the month, I have my diary, and we'll speak about this. I plan everything down. I write everything down. So we can speak about that. We can speak about that.
But you're saying is that if it looks like people are being more successful with their multitasking, they've set a system up.
It could be. Okay. It could be, yes. I know in my life I have.
Okay.
And I encourage other people to do the same. But
does that enable us to be able to do switch tasking? Because I think that, meaning the idea of driving and listening to something, walking and listening to something, exercising, I think that's generally accepted, that people can do that. But I think that what's becoming more and more common today, whether or not it's an expectation in the workplace or just the fact that people have accustomed, and perhaps, I don't know if this is true to say that people have, through habit, have wired their brains that they're just jumping from one thing to the next because they have a hard time just paying attention because they're always just doing this, and then there's this message and all the beeps and all the notifications and all the emails popping up. Where is there a way that switch tasking can be done? Because I think that's where where I think many people are struggling with this point, because that's really what's taking place.
So I believe so, yes.
All right, can you share some?
I'll share. First of all, I'll tell you a story. The first thing that I think is really important is having a Seder. Having a Seder, and in a general language, it's called chunking time. Number one, having a Seder and chunking time. So you can do one or more things throughout the day, throughout half the day, throughout your morning, throughout a couple of hours. You could do one or more things. And the more that you are prepared, do you remember we spoke about in one of the podcasts, change and transition?
Yeah.
So the more that I can prepare the internal world of transition, meeting and being in relationship with change, the better off I am emotionally, the better off my neurology and my physiology and my emotionality is. Because I'm prepared. So what I do as a tip, I found this to be very helpful. I have a Seder. I write down, this is what I want to be doing, and I will chunk time. Now, chunking time could be 5 minutes, 5 minutes, 5 minutes. For example, we have in our community, I think you love this, if I remember correctly, we call it like the 5-5-5 rule, 10-10-10 rule, or 20-20-20 rule, whatever you want. And what is it? It's 5 minutes or 10 minutes journaling. It was 5 minutes of exercise and 5 minutes of some sort of meditative practice. You remember when
spoke about in the
_𝗀𝗧? Remember when you practiced it? I think it was maybe even during COVID. It was just a very, journaling, just 5 minutes of journaling. So you can do a few things in a short amount of time, and you own it, because you've scheduled it and you've blocked time for it.
Okay.
That's number one. I would add, what you can do is even use a timer. You block time and you use a timer. So you do 5 minutes of this, reset the time, 5 minutes of that, 5 minutes of... So that time is focused. So this is what I have done. I have planned out my day, blocked my time throughout my day. I have my timer, or if I'm doing a particular activity, can I finish realistically that activity in that time period if I have to finish an activity?
Okay.
I would as well suggest that when we are 𝗀𝗧his in something, when we're actually working on something, I try to get rid of all technical devices. Because what happens is there's something called focus. And we live in a generation where people's focus, people's clarity is under attack. We hear ping pong and this bzzz, it's a crazy matzav. So digital free zone. So when I'm working on something, I take my phone off the table and I make sure that it's turned off or it's somewhere else. I try to be very cautious with this, because that distraction of a ping or a pong or a rimmeling dong, that distraction will take you on a journey. It could very easily take you on a journey. Your mind now, I want to check my message. You have a voice, I want to check my message. That doesn't help you in being focused and feeling fulfilled and joyful and happy and stress-free. It causes stress. I would suggest as well that in life, what happens as well, not just in the workplace, not just in getting things done, there are relationships that suffer because we don't place the proper focus on them. So I'd ask my question, am I living a life where I've got actually focused time with the important areas of my life? Not just at work, because what happens if I'm sitting at work and my deeper drivers of other areas of life are not fulfilled, it's going to take away from me being present at work. And one more nakuda that I think is really important is that we get a lot of internal voices. We have a lot of internal voices that come up. Oh, I didn't do that. I didn't do this. I didn't do that. It's the most amazing thing. Why is it for so many people, they come to davening Shema and 𝗀8 Esrei, and it could be, Oy Shema Yisrael. Oh, I didn't take out the garbage for my wife. Hashem Elokeinu. Oh, I didn't get back to that person. Hashem Echad. Oy, 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 oy. But that's the reality. What happens is we come to daven Shema or 𝗀8 Esrei, and then there's this natural invasion of thoughts. And yet, when I'm at work, I don't have those thoughts, because we don't necessarily relax enough. And or that when the thoughts do come up, if they're things that need to get done, they will revisit and revisit and revisit. So I have a notebook. I have notebooks at several places. I've got a notebook at my table here in the base of Medrash. I've got a notebook in my office. I've got a notebook upstairs. And if there's a thought that comes up, something I need to deal with, now if I don't take it out of my mind, it will revisit because it's important. So I write it down. Or you can use a device and write it down. So again, just a couple of things to think about. Number one, scheduling and a schedule block. This is what I'm doing, 10 minutes on this, 20 minutes on that, half an hour on that. Number two is having a timer and resetting your mental capabilities of focus, of being engaged in something without distraction. Number three, without distraction, a digital free zone. If you can, move things that will disturb you. Disable your pings and pongs. Number four is making sure as well that you are caring for the important areas of your life and you're spending however much time it is. 5 minutes of being present with a loved one could be worth several hours distracted. And the last one that we mentioned is that we are a lot of the time going to have revisiting thoughts. Write them down, get them out of your head into something else outside of you, and that will help limit hopefully that thinking. And I just want to add one more story that was a personal story with me. There's today in where's 𝗀𝗧his Yeshiva?
In Baltimore.
So there's an Adam Godel. He's going to probably be one of the next 𝗀𝗘𝗧. I'm not going to say his name because I don't think he'd want his name said. He's going to be one of the next 𝗀𝗘𝗧. I was 𝗀𝗘 to sit next to him when I was in yeshiva. And already, age 16 or 17, he was Messiah Bavli, Yerushalmi, Medrash Rabbah, Tanakh, Mishnah, Adam Godel Ma'od, and he comes from unbelievable yichus. His Zaydas were Rosh Yeshiva and 𝗀𝗘𝗧. And I used to sit next to him, and I was always jealous of him. It's like I would say to him, like, you sit, undisturbed for hours, 10 10, 15 hours just sitting and steiging. And I'm like all over the place. It's like, okay, I've got my sefer. Okay, I need a coffee. Okay, let me go get a coffee. Okay, come back with my coffee. I need the toilet. Okay, I run to go to the toilet. Okay, now, I'll sit down. I need to get my piece of paper to write my note. And it was ridiculous. And he was very patient, 𝗬𝗓𝗧 𝗦𝗏, and he was like, okay. And I turned and I asked him, with similar age, and I said, what's pshat? He said, take a timer. Set yourself a timer, nothing else. Rabbi, he said to me, and Rabbi Scheinberg, I went to visit Rabbi Scheinberg, and Rabbi Scheinberg said this. I heard this from Rabbi Scheinberg, and I shared it with him. It's mamash, 𝗬𝗓𝗧 𝗦𝗏, that people sometimes want to be an incubator bocher. What's an incubator bocher? The air conditioning has to be right, the seat has to be right, you get nothing done. You're so frustrated. Just stop, get into a state of das, take a breath, sit and learn. And he said to me, set yourself a timer, 5 minutes, okay? I'll help you. Don't move. Sit, have your head in the... And that's how I started. 5 minutes, I didn't move. 1 minute, I didn't move. 2 minutes, and I built up. And I remember I sat for an hour learning. Straight learning. For other people, it's nothing. For me, it was a massive accomplishment, and he celebrated. So I think whatever we do, celebrate. Every success, celebrate. Success breeds and births success. Failure doesn't breed and birth success. Failure leads to failure, success leads to success. Celebrate your accomplishments, no matter how big or how small. Okay. Wow, that was a lot of information, Rav Gerzi. I think that if you weren't taking notes, make sure to hit rewind. Rav Gerzi just revealed a lot of secrets and tips. You'd have to pay a lot of money of coaching to be able to understand the realm of productivity. I'll tell you what I understood. I didn't take notes myself. I should have. The points we spoke about.
So what I've heard was this, and I just to bring us back to where we started, which was this question about multitasking. And what we're seeing taking place is that the results, although may have been promised, or the feeling we get from seeing everyone else doing lots of things and feeling like they're getting a lot done, is that people are not necessarily being more productive.
Correct.
And what we've just shared is that the reason for that is because what's taking place in the non-productive multitasking is shift tasking. And when shift tasking is taking place within our minds, we don't have the ability to be able to do that in an effective way, and therefore it takes away from our productivity. Now the question I'd asked was, is there the ability for us to be successful in shift tasking? Because in the world that we live in, and jobs that we're in, right, and what we're seeing taking place is there is a lot of shift tasking that's taking place. What I've heard from Rabbi right now is that the answer is yes and no. And the reason why the answer is yes and no is that really shift tasking will not be productive, but if we implement certain tools that enable us to be able to do one task and then shift to another task more seamlessly, so that will enable us to be more productive. So those tools are going to be when we're involved in one task, be fully focused, whether it's the timer, right, or whether it's taking the deep breath, be fully focused in that which we're doing, because when we're involved in one task, right, the scheduling of it, we're involved in one task, and while we're involved in that one task, we're jumping to another, we're allowing these thoughts to jump into our minds while we're doing that, so then we're not even going to do that efficiently. And then, to be able to develop a skill set of transition from one task to another task. And it sounds that the more that we practice this and the more we get to know ourselves, the more that we have the ability to smoothly transition from one task to another task to another task to another task, where without those transitions and without those guidelines for focus set into place, what's going to happen is that we're not going to be productive in anything that we're doing. So even though we may be like that story just shared, bouncing from this and bouncing this way and bouncing that way, back and forth, we're not going to be able to do that in an effective way. So that was what I heard from today, and I guess what we can take as a walk away for ourselves as we try to be able to move forward in our journey. And this I'm going to just throw in what I asked the question in the beginning about the Torah's perspective on it, okay. Right? Is that we see that that kavana is something which is so important in Torah, and it's something that the Torah emphasizes that we always need to be involved in all the time. And the Torah recognizes that without kavana, right, we're not going to be as effective and impactful in that which we need to do.
Yes.
So I think that the walkway for us is that we need to, even despite being in environments where we may see lots of people doing things, right, and we may be asked to do lots of things, we have to get to know ourselves and recognize that we need to be balei kavana. But if we are balei kavana, right, then, and we develop that skill of being balei kavana and implement some of the tools the Rebbe just shared of understanding the psychology of productivity, so on and so forth, so then we're able to be balei kavana while at the same time be able to achieve. Or be able to achieve by being able to learn Torah when we can learn Torah, not when it's taking away from other things, but also to be able to do things more efficiently, more productively, so that we can free up more times in our lives, so therefore be able to learn more Torah, to be able to serve Hashem, be there for our families. So Mr. Hashem, we should all be blessed to be able to think about where our kavana levels are, right, and to at least find one area where we can try to be able, right, to be more focused and at the same time to pick up some of the skills that we've heard here today to be able to be more productive.
Wonderful. 𝗀𝗽liche.